At 06:47 a.m. on September 29, 2025, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter on routine patrol in the Gulf of Mexico, 43 nautical miles south of New Orleans, intercepted what appeared to be a commercial fishing vessel. The boarding was supposed to be standard: check documentation, verify catch limits, look for contraband. But when Petty Officer Marcus Wright climbed down into the cargo hold with a handheld radiation detector as part of post 9/11 protocols, the device didn't beep. It screamed. The reading was over 500 millisieverts per hour, lethal dose in less than 4 hours of exposure. And the source was a reinforced container bolted to the deck, covered with fishing nets, and surrounded by ice bins full of red snapper. Inside that container was a Russian-made tactical nuclear warhead. Yield estimated at 10 kilotons, destination unknown. And it was 120 miles from one of America's largest cities. This is the story of Operation Steel Harbor, the day the Coast Guard intercepted a nuclear weapon in American waters, the 14-hour standoff that followed, and the discovery that this wasn't the only warhead. It was one of 4, and the other 3 were still missing. If you're here because you want military analysis that goes deeper than headlines, hit subscribe on Navy Warfare right now. And drop a comment. What would you do if you found a nuclear bomb 120 miles from a major city? The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Resolute, a 210-foot Reliance-class vessel, had been conducting counter-narcotics operations in the Gulf for 3 weeks. September 29th was supposed to be the last day of patrol before returning to port in Mobile, Alabama. Routine stop-and-search operations. Nothing unusual. The crew was already thinking about shore leave. At 06:22 a.m., radar picked up a slow-moving contact 12 nautical miles to the south. AIS, Automatic Identification System, showed it as the Maria Estrella, a 65-foot commercial fishing vessel registered in Panama. But the ship's track was odd. It wasn't following normal fishing patterns. It was maintaining a steady course northwest, directly toward the Louisiana coast. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Torres, the Resolute's commanding officer, made the call. Let's take a look. Standard boarding protocols. At 06:35, the Resolute pulled alongside the Maria Estrella and hailed on VHF radio. Fishing vessel Maria Estrella, this is United States Coast Guard. Heave to and prepare for boarding. There was a long pause, then a voice, accented, reluctant. Coast Guard, we are commercial fishing vessel. We have done nothing wrong. Understood. This is a routine safety and documentation inspection. Heave to now or you will be forcibly stopped. The Maria Estrella's engine slowed. The vessel came to a stop, rocking in the light Gulf swell. A Coast Guard boarding team, 4 personnel including Petty Officer Wright, deployed in a rigid-hull inflatable boat and approached the fishing vessel. The crew of the Maria Estrella, 6 men, stood on deck watching. They looked nervous, more nervous than usual. Wright was the first to board, followed by the team leader, Petty Officer First Class David Chen. Standard procedure: check documentation, inspect safety equipment, verify the catch, and scan for contraband with drug detection dogs and radiation detectors. The radiation detector was a relatively new addition to boarding protocols, implemented after intelligence reports suggested terrorist groups were attempting to smuggle radiological materials into the U.S. Wright turned on the detector and swept the deck. Normal background readings. He moved toward the cabin. Still normal. Then he descended into the cargo hold. The detector went into alarm mode immediately. The digital readout spiked from 0.1 millisieverts per hour to over 500. Wright's blood went cold. He'd been trained on radiation detection, and he knew what those numbers meant. He keyed his radio, trying to keep his voice steady. Chen, we've got a hot source down here. Really hot. I'm coming up. Say again? Radiation, high levels. We need to clear this vessel now. Chen's response was immediate and professional. All boarding team, withdraw to the RHIB. Now. Move. The 4 Coast Guardsmen scrambled off the Maria Estrella and back to their inflatable boat, putting distance between themselves and the fishing vessel. On the deck of the Resolute, Lieutenant Commander Torres grabbed the secure satellite phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Coast Guard Sector New Orleans. The second was to U.S. Northern Command. Within minutes, the situation escalated from routine boarding to national security crisis. At 07:15 a.m., a conference call connected Torres with Coast Guard headquarters, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Department of Energy's Nuclear Emergency Support Team, and the Pentagon. Torres gave her report concisely. We have a suspected radiological source aboard a commercial fishing vessel in the Gulf of Mexico, 43 nautical miles south of New Orleans. Radiation readings exceed 500 millisieverts per hour. The vessel's crew is non-cooperative and appears to be foreign nationals. We have established a 500-meter exclusion zone and are maintaining visual contact. The voice from the Department of Energy came on the line, urgent and technical. Commander, can you describe the source, size, shape, container type? Torres relayed the question to Wright over the radio. His voice came back, tight with stress. Large reinforced container, approximately 6 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. Bolted to the deck. Heavy-duty construction, covered with fishing nets. That's consistent with a transport container for a strategic or tactical nuclear device, the DOE analyst said. We need a NEST team on site immediately. NEST, Nuclear Emergency Support Team, the specialists who dealt with loose nukes. How long until they can get here? Torres asked. Minimum 6 hours by air from Andrews Air Force Base, but we're scrambling a team now. 6 hours. Torres looked at the Maria Estrella through binoculars. The crew was still on deck, watching the Coast Guard cutter. They hadn't attempted to flee. They hadn't attempted to dump anything overboard. They were just waiting. That scared her more than anything. Subscribe to Navy Warfare for the tactical breakdowns you won't find anywhere else. And tell us in the comments, how do you secure a nuclear weapon on a ship in the middle of the ocean? At 08:30 a.m., 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons from the Louisiana Air National Guard screamed over the Gulf at 500 feet, establishing a combat air patrol over the Maria Estrella. They were followed by an MH-65 Dolphin helicopter from Coast Guard Air Station New Orleans, carrying a team of tactical operators and additional radiation detection equipment. The FBI's hostage rescue team was mobilizing. Navy EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, specialists were being airlifted from Naval Air Station Pensacola. And somewhere over the Atlantic, a C-17 Globemaster carrying the NEST team was pushing its engines to maximum speed. But the immediate problem was the crew of the Maria Estrella. Who were they? What were they planning to do with a nuclear warhead? And were they willing to die for it? At 09:15, an FBI negotiator patched through to the Maria Estrella via radio. His voice was calm, professional, designed to de-escalate. Maria Estrella, this is the FBI. We know what you're carrying. We need to resolve this situation safely. No one needs to get hurt. Please respond. After a long pause, a voice came back. Heavily accented. Russian, maybe. Or Eastern European. We are just fishermen. We know nothing about radiation. Maybe your equipment is broken. We've confirmed the readings with multiple devices. We know you have a radiological source aboard your vessel. We need you to secure that source and prepare for a boarding team to take custody of it. We will not allow boarding. Then you're leaving us with very few options. We are in international waters. You have no authority. The FBI negotiator looked at the map. The Maria Estrella was 43 nautical miles offshore. U.S. territorial waters extended 12 nautical miles. Beyond that was the contiguous zone, extending to 24 nautical miles, where the U.S. could enforce customs and immigration laws. Beyond that was the exclusive economic zone, extending 200 nautical miles, where the U.S. had resource rights but limited enforcement authority. Technically, the Maria Estrella was in the EEZ but not in U.S. territorial waters. But maritime law was clear. A vessel carrying weapons of mass destruction posed an imminent threat, and international law permitted interdiction. Maria Estrella, you are carrying a weapon of mass destruction toward the United States coast. That constitutes an imminent threat under international maritime law. We have the authority and the obligation to board your vessel. You can cooperate, or we can take you by force. Your choice. The radio went silent. At 10:47 a.m., the Nest team arrived by helicopter, landing on the deck of a Navy destroyer that had raced to the area from patrol near Key West. The team leader, Dr. Sarah Vance, a Department of Energy physicist who'd spent 15 years dealing with nuclear materials, was briefed on the situation during the flight. "What's your assessment?" the destroyer captain asked her. "If the readings are accurate, we're dealing with an intact nuclear device, not a dirty bomb, not loose radioactive material, an actual warhead. The radiation signature suggests enriched uranium or plutonium. Given the container size and the fact that it's on a fishing vessel, my best guess is a tactical nuke. Probably Russian, possibly from the Cold War era. Yields somewhere between 1 and 50 kilotons. How stable is it? Impossible to say without direct examination. But if they've transported it this far, it's probably reasonably stable. The bigger risk is if they try to detonate it, or if we damage it during interdiction." Can they actually detonate it? If they have the arming codes and the technical knowledge, yes. Tactical nukes are designed to be field deployable. They're not as sophisticated as strategic weapons, but they're still functional. If that thing goes off, everything within a 3-mile radius is vaporized. Thermal effects extend to 10 miles. Fallout depends on wind and weather, but New Orleans would be in the danger zone. The captain looked out at the Maria Estrella, a tiny speck on the horizon. A fishing boat carrying enough destructive power to erase a city. "What's your recommendation?" "We board that vessel, secure the device, and get it as far from civilian population as possible. And we do it fast, before whoever is controlling that crew decides to make a statement." At 11:30 a.m., the decision came from Washington: assault and secure the vessel. Navy SEALs were being helicoptered in from their base in Mississippi, but they wouldn't arrive for another 90 minutes. The Coast Guard tactical team would make the initial approach. Lieutenant Commander Torres briefed her team aboard the Resolute. "We're going in fast and hard. Flashbangs, breaching charges if needed. Objective is to secure the crew before they can reach the container. Nest team will be right behind us to deal with the device. Questions?" One of the operators raised his hand. "Ma'am, if they blow it, we're all dead anyway, right?" Torres looked at him. "Yes. So let's make sure they don't get the chance." At 12:03 p.m., 2 rigid-hull inflatable boats launched from the Resolute and the destroyer, approaching the Maria Estrella from opposite sides. Overhead, a Coast Guard helicopter circled, snipers in position to take out anyone who threatened the boarding teams. On the deck of the fishing vessel, the crew watched the boats approach. They didn't move to resist. They just stood there, hands visible, waiting. The RHIBs pulled alongside. The tactical team boarded in under 10 seconds, weapons up, shouting commands. "Get down! Get on the deck! Hands behind your head! Now!" The crew complied immediately. No resistance, no weapons. They laid down on the deck and allowed themselves to be zip-tied without a word. It was almost too easy. The team leader radioed back to Torres. "Vessel secure, 6 crew in custody, no resistance, moving to the cargo hold now." Torres felt a knot in her stomach. Something was wrong. This was too simple. The tactical team descended into the cargo hold, weapons trained on the container. It sat there, bolted to the deck exactly as Wright had described. The radiation detector in the hands of one of the operators screamed its warning. Over 600 millisieverts per hour now. Getting closer to the source increased the exposure. Nest team, we have visual on the package requesting immediate support. Dr. Vance and 2 of her specialists boarded the Maria Estrella, wearing full protective suits and carrying specialized equipment. They descended into the hold, and Vance approached the container with a handheld spectrometer. She took readings, checked the container's construction, examined the locking mechanism. Then she turned to the tactical team leader. "This is a Type 3 Soviet-era transport container, designed for tactical nuclear warheads in the 10 to 20 kiloton range. Based on the radiation signature, I'd estimate this is a warhead from a nuclear artillery shell or a demolition device. The container is sealed and appears intact. No signs of tampering or arming mechanisms visible from the outside." "Can you open it?" "Not here. We need to transport this to a secure facility where we can properly disarm and examine it. But first, we need to interrogate the crew and find out where this came from and where it was going. The crew of the Maria Estrella was transferred to the destroyer and separated for interrogation. FBI agents, working with interpreters, began the questioning. Within 2 hours, the story started to emerge. The crew were contract workers, recruited in Cartagena, Colombia, 6 weeks earlier. They'd been paid $50,000 each to transport special cargo from a rendezvous point in international waters to a drop-off location near the Louisiana coast. They claimed they didn't know what the cargo was, but the radiation burns on 2 of the crew members suggested they'd been exposed for weeks. The rendezvous had occurred 8 days earlier, 200 nautical miles east of Cuba. A larger vessel, described as a rust-streaked cargo ship flying no flag, had transferred the container to the Maria Estrella. The crew of the cargo ship had been Russian, or possibly Ukrainian. They'd spoken in Russian and had made it clear that if the Maria Estrella's crew tried to open the container or deviate from their course, they would be killed. The drop-off location was supposed to be a small marina near Dulac, Louisiana. The crew had GPS coordinates. They were supposed to arrive on October 1st, transfer the container to a truck waiting at the dock, and disappear. They didn't know who would be receiving it. But the most chilling part of the interrogation came when one of the crew members, a 34-year-old from Venezuela, said something that made every person in the room go cold. The Russian man, he told us there were 4 containers. He said we were the 3rd boat. 4 containers, 4 nuclear warheads. The Maria Estrella was carrying number 3, which meant 2 had already been delivered, and 1 more was still out there. At 14:22 p.m., that information reached the White House Situation Room. The President, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the heads of the FBI and DHS listened as the Coast Guard commander briefed them via secure video link. Mr. President, based on crew interrogations, we believe this is part of a coordinated smuggling operation involving 4 tactical nuclear warheads of Russian origin. 1 warhead has been interdicted. 3 remain unaccounted for. 2 may have already reached the U.S. mainland. 1 is still in transit. Why? The President leaned forward. Do we have any idea where the other warheads are? Negative, sir. The crews were compartmentalized. They only knew their own routes and drop-off points. We're analyzing all maritime traffic in the Gulf over the past 30 days, looking for similar vessels and patterns. What about the warhead we have? Is it safe? Nest team has secured it. They're preparing to transport it to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico for disarmament. But sir, if the other warheads are already in the U.S., we could be looking at an imminent threat. The FBI director spoke up. We're mobilizing every field office in the Gulf states. Full radiation sweeps of ports, marinas, warehouses, and transport hubs. If those warheads are on U.S. soil, we'll find them. How long? The President asked. Days, sir. Maybe weeks. These devices are small enough to hide in a standard shipping container or a truck. Without a specific location, we're searching thousands of square miles. The President stood up, his face grim. I want every available asset on this. Coast Guard, Navy, FBI, DOE, National Guard, everyone. And I want a plan for what we do if we find one of these things in an American city. The search began immediately. Coast Guard cutters swept the Gulf. Radiation detection teams deployed to every port from Texas to Florida. FBI agents raided the marina in Dulac and found recent signs of heavy vehicle traffic, but no warhead. Customs and Border Protection scanned every truck crossing the border. And NSA turned its full surveillance apparatus toward finding any communications related to the smuggling operation. 3 days later, on October 2nd, a second warhead was discovered in a warehouse in Brownsville, Texas, 15 miles from the Mexican border. It had been sitting there for 2 weeks, hidden inside a shipping container labeled as industrial machinery. The warehouse owner, when arrested, claimed he'd been paid $100,000 cash to store the container and not ask questions. He had no idea what was inside. On October 8th, a third warhead was found in the cargo hold of a barge on the Mississippi River, 60 miles north of New Orleans. It had been en route to Memphis when a random Coast Guard inspection, now standard procedure for all river traffic, detected the radiation signature. 3 warheads recovered, 1 still missing. The fourth warhead has never been found. Despite months of searching, despite thousands of man-hours and millions of dollars spent on detection equipment, it remains unaccounted for. Intelligence agencies believe it may have been moved out of the country after the interdiction of the Maria Estrella tipped off the smuggling network. Or it may still be hidden somewhere in the United States, waiting. The investigation into the source of the warheads traced them back to a former Soviet military depot in Kazakhstan, where tactical nuclear weapons had been stored during the Cold War. The depot had been officially decommissioned in 1995, but audits later revealed that at least 6 warheads were missing from inventory. The Russian government denied any involvement, claiming the warheads were stolen by criminal organizations during the chaos of the Soviet collapse. The smuggling network was identified as a collaboration between a Russian organized crime syndicate and a Colombian drug cartel. The plan, according to intercepted communications, was to sell the warheads to the highest bidder. Potential buyers included terrorist organizations, rogue states, and, in one terrifying possibility, domestic extremist groups. The interdiction in the Gulf disrupted the operation before any sales could be completed. But the fourth warhead remains missing, and every few months, radiation detection teams sweep major cities, ports, and transportation hubs, looking for a signature that could indicate its presence. The crew of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Resolute were awarded the Coast Guard Medal for their actions on September 29, 2025. Petty Officer Marcus Wright, whose radiation detector first identified the threat, was promoted and now trains other boarding teams in WMD detection procedures. Dr. Sarah Vance and the NEST team successfully disarmed all 3 recovered warheads. The plutonium cores were transported to secure facilities and eventually reprocessed. The warheads, remnants of Cold War arsenals, were finally rendered inert. But the operation raised terrifying questions that remain unanswered. How many other Soviet-era nuclear weapons are missing? How many criminal organizations have access to WMD smuggling networks? And if 4 warheads made it this far, how many others have been moved without detection? Now I want 3 perspectives from you. First, should the United States implement mandatory radiation screening for all maritime traffic entering its waters, even if it significantly slows commerce? Second, what should the penalty be for individuals who knowingly transport weapons of mass destruction, even if they claim they didn't know what they were carrying? Third, is it possible that the fourth warhead was actually a decoy? Or do you believe it's still out there? Comment your detailed strategic and security analysis below. Your insights drive the conversations we have on Navy warfare. And if this breakdown of the day the Coast Guard stopped a nuclear weapon 120 miles from New Orleans gave you new understanding of how vulnerable America's coastlines really are, prove it by hitting that like button, subscribing to Navy Warfare, and turning on notifications. Because somewhere, right now, someone might be moving another warhead, and next time, we might not get lucky. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant, and remember, the threats we don't see are the ones that kill us.